I think pastel pencils are often seen as a medium whereby we create these really fine polished pieces. But recently I've been enjoying using them to just do studies and have a little bit more play and fun. And actually drawing silverware is something that is really, really lovely with pastel pencils because there are so many different colours when the surface has become a little bit tarnished, but also of course they pick up reflections as well. And this isn't a step-by-step tutorial, but I will list all materials for you and I'll chat to you about the whole process, but just wanted to show you how you can use something as simple as an everyday spoon to just get a little bit of inspiration and play with your materials. And for this instance in particular, we'll really be focusing on the value structure, so the light and the darks, and how the edges interact by using colour to make these edges appear nice and rounded, which, just like I've done with a red tomato, that was the secret here, is the values, the light and the dark, help make this feel 3D, but it was the interactions of the colours over the edges that really rounded this out and started to make it feel quite full. And I find that really quite exciting. It's something that you can do with lots of different mediums. It's not constrained at all to pastel pencils. This is just art theory, really. So I've just done a bit of a sketch of my spoon, and this is done using a photo by Eugina Remark from Pastels. And I'm going to start with the 708 because I'd like to begin with the darkest darks. And this is a lovely pencil from Stabilo. It's a very warm dark grey, just about perfect for the shadow value for this. I'm working on the white pastelmat from Clairefontaine, which is the paper in this instance. So it's still grainy, it's still got a nice amount of tooth to it, but it will allow me to get layers on and a smooth finish at the same time. But again, I'm not looking for something that feels really like a photorealistic drawing. I'm trying to aim for something that feels painterly, which is what I'm often after when I'm working in colour. I'm really quite interested in the way that the material works on the page, the mark making, and how we can use value and colour to make something that feels potentially a little bit more exciting, or I often like to say a bit more alive than a photograph in particular. So there's quite a few stages to this. As I said, I'm not breaking it down into a traditional tutorial, but there are quite a few moments where we have to pause and decide what to do next in terms of value and colour, where maybe if you're a beginner in particular, you might have automatically just stopped and thought it complete. So it's a really lovely learning curve, this one, to just have a bit of a play using any medium that you've got and see how close you can get it to something that has a lovely presence on the page and a bit of a life of its own. So I'm just picking out all of the darks for now, and these are going to be enhanced later on using, as I said, colour, but I will also dip into black, which when I did my first spoon, I actually did that at the end, and I think I will reserve the black for the end because it's kind of just like turning up the contrast on a photo and allows you to see how much further you can potentially push other areas when you've exhausted your options with the materials that you've been using up until that point. And it was towards the end of the first spoon drawing that I really started to get into the hidden colours in there, which I had originally designed this as a bit of a tutorial, but I had just too much fun with it, to be honest. So it's more of a colour and value study. So you can see already we have what is appearing to be the shape of a spoon starting on the page. I'm going to fill in some of the areas a bit more. This is what I'd often do when I'm beginning a drawing and I'm putting in my darkest darks first. You don't have to put in your darkest darks first. And I will mark it out, reassess, and decide if I'm happy with the placement before going in and pressing a little bit harder, because with pastel, it's quite difficult to get rid of it, but it's easy to just add more. So you don't want to kind of overdo an area before you're happy with that placement. I'm also going to be putting a lot of layers, of course, on all of this, so I don't need to go completely crazy at this first stage. So with pastel, you just have to be really aware of the dust, so it's a good idea to tap or blow your work off. And then I'm going to start with the lighter areas. This is quite a normal process for me to lay in my lightest lights and my darkest darks first. You don't have to work in this way, but when we have a subject such as this is the ivory now, 105, The lights and the darks are quite easy to pick out, and it's actually the mid-tones and those hidden colours which are a little bit trickier to see and also help to bring the piece to life. So why not start in an easy, in inverted commas that is of course, in an easy area and build it out from there. With pastel, you can overdo the lights quite happily. So I'd prefer to take an area too light than take it too dark. It's easier to make it darker, it's harder to make it lighter. So that's some of the ivory, which on the white paper shows up as being quite yellow and to an extent fairly dark, I would say. Not super dark, but of course, if I was to do the ivory on a brown piece of paper, it would look nearly white. And then I'm going to get darker with the 692, which again, on other papers, this shows up as being really light, but you can see on here, it feels like a mid-tone, it's quite dark, and it's already bringing in those really lovely tarnished colours that we have sitting inside the spoon. I'm sweeping my pencil on and off the page for a lot of this. It just helps me to keep my mark making really fluid and the different areas start to join together more naturally. So I'll start to weave some colour over the top of these sections up here. There are so many different colours that are going to be packed into this yet. It's a really interesting drawing despite the fact that it's just a spoon. So you can see again, if we just turn it on its side, you can see how the structure begins to come together quite quickly. Twist it around again. And I'm going to try and work over the whole spoon to start with, because this is like an underpainting that we're putting in now, as much as when we're doing a subject that doesn't have layers of fur on it, we will see a lot of this so-called underpainting by the end. The underpainting, really, the first stage is laying in our biggest shapes, the most important shapes. So we haven't filled in all of the spoon, but I'm already going to put a background in because it's really important for this piece, being that I'm working on the white. We have a lot of very, very light edges to the spoon where it's catching a lot of the light, and that was something that I learned the hard way in my study, and I really struggled to get it to show out because I wasn't really thinking about it as I worked through. I'm so used to working on a darker value of paper that the white, especially if I picked out a Caran d'Ache white, would always show up, but on the white paper it doesn't work like that. So I'm going to go in with the 700, which is a light grey from Stabilo Carbocello. And I'm going to use this for the tablecloth. Now, I'm not doing the texture of the tablecloth, I'm leaving this as a nice sketch. It's something that I really enjoy. Again, that slightly more painterly feel. You can see that it is a drawing, it's not trying to be something else. And I'm just going to ensure right from the get-go that I'm leaving an edge around my spoon, and this can be made smaller as necessary, but you can see it's allowing me to keep some card clean and white. And I just need to make sure that I just blend this edge out. Often use my pencil on the side when I'm blending edges out because it just allows me to cover more of the paper. Always twist your work so you can get a comfortable working angle. Again, coming around the spoon, the light on this edge is actually yellow, but I need to make sure that I leave an edge. So as I come further around, this is where the edge becomes black. So I can just draw straight up to that black edge that I've already started to put in. It will also get darker. We have a shadow to go in. And as we come underneath the spoon, I am actually going to grab, as I did on the original, I'm going to grab the white, which is going to seem really weird to start with because you can't see the white on the paper, being that the paper is white, but you'll see why in a moment. So I'm going to put a glaze down underneath the spoon, and this is where we have reflected light, so it's light that's bouncing underneath the handle of the spoon and back onto the table, and it makes the table a little bit lighter. And then go over the top, and you can see that area remains lighter because there is a little bit of white underneath it. And And then we'll just get a touch darker. So this is the 706, another nice grey from Stabilo Carbocello, a little bit warm. I'm using it on the edge because that means that you get a nice soft coverage. I'm just going to pop in the shadow that is being cast by the spoon. All of this can be returned to, but it is quite useful just to get this set up, and it helps us see the values inside the spoon differently. So I didn't put my background on till later on because I was just doing this originally as a bit of fun, a little study, not really thinking about it that much. And it wasn't until I was partway through that I thought, actually, I'm really enjoying this and might quite like to share it with people and show you how I did it. So then I thought I better put the background in, and of course it makes a really, really big difference to the way that all of your values appear to look on the page. Okay. A little bit lighter in the middle, and just glazing over the edge of the shadow just allows it to be nice and soft. So we have a very basic background in, we've got a really basic start to the spoon as well. So the next step is to try and get rid of all of the white that shouldn't be there on the spoon. So I'm going to go to a really cool grey because there is some blue on this. So 722, I turn my spoon around and you can see some cool grey just creeping up the handle. Now I need to be a little bit careful because there's also quite a bit of white in here. So already you have to really be thinking about the finished product quite early on, which in the example I actually didn't do because I was just messing around to start with, and then had to go and try and fix a lot of things afterwards, which is really, really tricky when you're attempting to get white back in or lighter values. So a bit of that blue tinge travelling along the spoon. Also got some blue around this reflection in here. Kind of just stop and have a look and see where else you might want to use a pencil while you have it out. We don't need a lot of blue in this, but it does have quite a nice effect. It's getting a bit darker, 706. I'm going to fill in the handle on the darker side of the drawing. So this is where we're starting to see the width of the handle, and then that disappears again and we get a little bit of a light edge just in there. But I'm really trying to leave this somewhat painterly. I don't want to fill everything in perfectly. I want it to have a little bit of life and not be too stiff by the end. I'm just sweeping the pencil on and off the page when I want the areas of pastel to knit together nicely. See some more around here. Again, I need to be a little bit careful because we have a lighter edge. So again, I'm just trying to see where I can use this pencil while I have it in hand. And then I will move on to another pencil and do the same thing. It's a really just slow act of building up. And at the moment, what I'm focusing on are my values. They're the lights and the darks. I'm going to swap again to the 700 and just give myself a base over the other areas of white where there'll be a whole mix of different values and colours happening in these sections. Just want to get rid of the white where it shouldn't be. See already we have a really basic spoon that's coming together quite nicely. Okay, Okay, so we've got to this really basic stage, and it's now at the point that we just start to look at some colours as well. So up until this point, obviously there is yellow in there, but what I've been focusing on is the light and the dark relationships. But I have a whole host of these different browns that can go in, and these kind of represent the tarnished areas as well as a little bit of green too. And the nice thing about including a little bit of green is that it is a complementary colour to red, which means that they contrast each other quite a lot. So I'm going to begin with the 680. To be honest, I'm just picking up pencils that I can see a use for in the reference photo. So there is, I think, really a reflection here, but it's lovely. A little bit of warmth down at the bottom of the spoon. Once you start adding in some colours, it's really quite easy to see where else you might be able to just drop a little bit of it in. And again, you need to keep your mind on values as well. How light or dark is the pencil that you're using for that area? Because every colour has a value, has lots of different properties, but one of them is a value. And as much as you might pick up the right colour, such as a yellow, if it's not the right value for that area, it won't sit there correctly. So I need to make sure that the different sort of ready browns that I start to use are appropriate in value for the areas that I work them into. And I tend to work in very light layers for this. What I'm aiming for is to glaze things together so that we can't necessarily see that there is one colour in a section. It looks like a whole different myriad of colours that have been mixed together, which will make it much, much more interesting by the end. You can see the red starts to round this out. This is a lovely one for the tarnished areas. This is the 685. So I'm using Stabilo Carbothello for this drawing. I might use a little bit of Caran d'Ache white if I need it, because the Caran d'Ache white is really, really highly pigmented. It shows up really well when other colours can struggle a little bit more. Some really deep reds going in there. This needs to become darker still. I really like to heighten this tarnished colour in there. It makes it glow. So a nice deep red, 670. Start to work this into the edge, and then I'll be working in some more of the 708, I think, which is the dark grey that I started with. You can see, because of the value of that, it's making the spoon curve a little bit more, keeping it to the edges. See the opportunity for some lovely warmth in here. So again, this is a glazing moment where I'm glazing it into colours which are already there. It can go darker along this edge. Start to work around this top edge of the spoon. Definitely need the dark edge to go in around the outside as well. So move the pencil in small circles inside an area when I want to mix the pastel out instead of having a hard line, and it starts to gently blend things together without making the space too large in the blend. You don't want to blend it out and end up all the way in the middle before you've got a smooth blend, because that'd be too far. So small circles can just help to soften the edge. I quite like to outline things in sections as opposed to one hard line, and this just helps with that nice painterly feel. And then we do still have a slightly darker outline, but I'm going to change to the 106 as it's just carefully disappears around this edge. Definitely want to do some work into this section. It needs to go quite a bit darker, but we've got a lot of warmth in there, so I think we can return to some of our golds and just have a little bit of a play. I'm going to work with pencil direction to keep these nice curves in there and just mix a few different colours together, really, so that we can have some interesting looking reflections. It's almost like the illusion of detail, but I'm not actually taking loads of time over it to think about where all the different colours are sitting. You see it just starts to bring a lovely effect in there. Definitely need some more dark around the outside to contrast it. So again, 708, And then I will mix in some nice warm browns to that as well. Let's just make this darker at the same time. All of these shapes, they just kind of melt together, and that's what we're looking for. We're looking for really nice smooth marks, smooth shapes. It's a lovely shape design exercise, really. Okay, let's again thinking about the values, thinking about how all of this is sweeping together. 706, it can sweep out of the 708. I want to get this a bit lighter. So I'm going to work back on the reflections for a moment. So using the ivory, which is the 105, this is the one that's really close to white. And you see, again, moving in those small circles, how that has just blended all of these edges together. So I can glaze directly over the top and you get a lovely, lovely soft effect. This is what pastel pencils are just so good at. And this is why they are really, really good for wildlife work, because they naturally put down these soft appearing marks. And that means that even details like fur has a kind of soft look to it, which of course fur is generally quite soft, and it's just why they work so well. So we've got some reflections over here. Small details that they just start to round everything out. This is where I'm going to be putting in some green soon. I think I need something with a shocker colour in there, so I'm going to pick out the 221, which I most certainly did not use in the original sketch. I'm going to tone it down, but I quite like to have something that is a bit more vivid in there, a bit more fun. If I was mixing my own colours in paint, I'd be going kind of wild with the different colour combinations that I could do. Then if you move over the top, if you glaze over a colour, you can change its characteristics. So I've still got a bit of that orange in there, but the ivory has knocked it back. So let's pop that green in, because we kind of need it to start mixing things and create the correct grey. So this is the 575. I'm going to mix it with some ochre colours to knock back the blue tinge in it and make it a much, much warmer, desaturated green. You can see how making your greys more interesting in terms of their colours really starts to make the drawing something that's interesting as opposed to just a drawing of a spoon. So if we look for an ochre kind of brown, such as this one, 685, then I can use it on the side and glaze over the top. So when I'm glazing something, we're getting a mix of those two different colours and values. So there is still a hint of green in there, you can see, but it looks quite different now, and it's much better harmonised with everything else because it has some of the sort of ochre browns which are apparent in other areas of the drawing. So going back in again with the ivory, I was about to say the white, it's not a white. I'm going to be picking out a white soon. So I'm going to put some red brown into the darks now. So I've got 640. And I'm going to be light with it, but I'm going to start to work it into the area of 708, the really dark brown, and it's going to make it feel much more rounded and lifted. So because we're glazing as opposed to pressing hard, again, we have an area where there are two different things happening at once, and the colour is really helping to lift this out of the page and make it feel a lot more 3D. You don't need to press very hard with this to have an effect. Can use it on the point. It's quite a dark pencil. See, for me that has really progressed this area quite a lot. Quite a small adjustment, but when you're working with colour, really consider where you might need to use it. Such as the twist up into the handle. That is a really luscious dark there, so putting a bit of colour in makes it feel, to my eyes, much more full. Need to do quite a lot more work on the handle itself. It has been abandoned because it's not to me quite as interesting Sweep a little bit of this nice red into the base. So I will be using some black later on, but for me this red brown is as important. Got some of the more shocking red, the 675, which I did use in the original sketch as well, just to bring in a little bit more colour into areas where we have that really sharp tinge of the tarnish, which I am very much enhancing. Need to blend all of this section out up here. Get a nice smooth edge to this reflection. I just need to dab something else into that reflection so it doesn't feel so so flat, because it's just one colour in there particularly. So a little bit of silver at the top. These two are very similar in value. Their lightness is very similar, but obviously they have different colours. So I'm getting a slight bounce on the page where we're trying to figure out if we're looking at a grey or if we're looking at a yellow. So this is the 700, which is actually the background colour. So just remind yourself when you pick up the background colour that if you move into the background or too close to it, it's going to, of course, just disappear. It's quite easy to forget that because it can feel quite a light colour when you're working in areas that have become so dark, but then when you push it next to the background, of course, it will suddenly appear the same value. Just want to soften these edges. There is quite a bit of dark, but it needs to be a bit softer. So again, I'm glazing backwards and forwards. Doesn't matter that there's loads of pastel down there, because it just means that everything's going to want to mix together, which is exactly what I want it to do. So it's going to, again, just take advantage of the way that pastel naturally works. So I really do need to work on the handle. I'm getting so caught up in the spoon, and there's still some edge work to do on the spoon, but I'm forgetting about the handle at all. So let's try and fill that in. I think a little bit more of that 722, which is the bluey grey. So every brand of pastel pencil that I've come across anyway, they offer you in general a selection of cool and warm greys, even if it is only a small selection. And Stabilo Carbothello do quite a good selection of greys, I would say. I think their dark greys aren't as good. Their very, very dark greys aren't as good as the Faber Castell because they just don't go as dark, but they do offer more intermediate steps. And so you get a wider range of greys, and then you get them in warm and in cool. So we've been using mostly the warm greys for this, but you can see that this shows up as blue, and that is, of course, one of the cool greys. So we need to make the right side of the handle darker. So just using a variety of browns and greys to do that. Again, glazing things together. Don't just want flat grey. Where the spoon is lifted off the table a little bit because the handle is curved at the base, so there is a little bit more light getting to the tablecloth there, just a little bit. It just helps lift the spoon upwards. A little bit of yellow light just running down that centre, you could almost call it a centre seam on the spoon handle. I'm sure there is an official name for that. And then using the white. Now this is the Stabilo Carbothello white, so it's not a really strong white. This is where I return to the Caran d'Ache when I want it to be incredibly bright. So we've got yellow light to go along the top edge here, which I'm actually going to use the slightly darker yellow for. So this is the Caran d'Ache 900. This is their 901. This is their Chinese white. And it's got a lot of pigment in it, so I really do like using it for areas where the white needs to be fairly strong. So apologies, I'm just covering this up a moment with my hand, just popping in this edge where it just needs to glitter. Again, I'm not worried about perfect lines for this because I quite like a little bit more texture. I want it to look like a drawing, not like I've tried to create a photograph. I really enjoy these lovely swirls in here where we can definitely see that someone has drawn this as opposed to tried to create something that is really perfect. Got a lovely light coming down the handle there. That shine really lifts the handle straight off the page. And then we can bring that light further down. Just diffuses out, so it's almost glowing. Just wiping my pencil off on my hand when I do that, just to prevent the white picking up lots of dust and contaminating things. So I'll give this a stronger edge, stronger white edge over here. And then, because I'm pressing really hard to get that to show up, what I will do is then take the grey, which is used on this inside area, and work over the top of the white to make it a smaller edge. Get a bit more of that lovely red-brown 640. Again, you can see I'm just sweeping it. I'm not making one long continuous line. Just allows these areas to kind of appear and disappear. A bit more of the original. Was that 685? No, 680. So that, I think it is just a reflection there, but it's a lovely little bit of orange. So you can very much take inspiration from the photo at this stage, but then really be thinking about the way that your colours are behaving together on the page and what you might like to do to make them sing a little bit more. Maybe you really like the interaction of certain values together. So this is where you can really start to take a bit of artistic direction and make the drawing your own. For me, they really make the shadows feel incredibly rich and rounded. Now I do have black still as an option, and I think I will add a little bit of black in because it really did work wonders on the sketch. But I've used quite a lot more of this red-brown for this drawing. Again, every drawing just turns out different. They're all individual. And I do like that effect. So I just want to make sure that I don't overplay the black when I come to that. So I'll pick up the white again in a moment. Just make a little bit more of some of the reflections. So you can make a hard mark and then swirl the pencil around it, and you can see that they just start to melt in. Okay, so let's pick up that white. Now in the photo there's a lot of blue there. I'm opting not to put the blue in because I've kept most of my colours very warm. There was a little bit of the blue-grey that went in there at the start. I'm not going to be reinstating it. I just like the warmth of these yellows, reds and that very yellow-green that I've got in there as well. I'm going to add a tiny little bit more green in a curving mark. So just trying to encourage that lovely curvature of the spoon. Anywhere else I've got an opportunity to weave a bit more green in. Also want to make sure that, you know, if you've got a colour that does stand out a little bit, that you have used it in other areas where it might work so that everything is nicely tied together. So I want to reinstate the black or add some black and just go over the shadows now. So this is the 680. And changing to the 7, that was the 780, this is the 706. And then of course 700. Now, you know, there are little tints of yellow in the shadow, and that's the reflected light coming off the spoon. It's quite tempting to just add a little bit of that in. I haven't done on my sketch, but I think I will on this. It is quite lovely. Just picking up any of my yellowy browns. Honestly, just the tiniest little bit, and it just helps tie these different areas together. And then I'm going to take the black. Again, I'm not working in a continuous line. Being mindful of the lovely red brown that I've put in as well, because again, I'd like to retain that. So this is where I'm putting a line in, and then I'm blending it down gently so that it just disappears into everything else. And then, as I did on the sketch, I just put a little bit, and I'm not pressing very hard. It does show up quite well, but just a little bit on that inner shadow, which is really creating the depth to our spoon. So again, that is a glaze. So you can see that final push, that final lift in value makes quite a big difference. It is why for this one, I like to leave it to the end, because it allows me to kind of give it that final breath of fresh air, you could say, and just lift it from the page a little bit more. Now again, this is still very painterly. The actual spoon itself is a little bit awkward. I drew it freehand and didn't take enough time over it, but they're all little quirks that I just quite like in small studies like this. So it's probably taken me, I'd say, about 40 minutes to do that, which is, I think, quite a good amount of time to spend on a value and colour study. So I started off really focusing on the value, and then saw how I could use colour to knit them together. And if we put the two spoons side by side, it was lovely to see as each drawing will come out different. You know, it's exactly the same reference from Eugina Remark on Pastel, but we get two different spoons out of it by the end. So I hope you've enjoyed just seeing how they came together. They are quite good fun to do actually. And I think it just shows you that you can use pastel pencils to sketch with. You don't have to always create drawings that are absolutely photorealistic perfect. There's loads of mistakes in these, but to be honest, I find them quite lovely mistakes because it makes it slightly more painterly. So I'm doing a small series at the moment of basically just everyday still life, which isn't something I've ever focused on before, but I'm actually really enjoying it, and also enjoying the fact that I get to use colours that I wouldn't normally use, such as in the tomato here. There's a whole range of reds and oranges, which are so vivid, I often don't need them for wildlife work. So I hope you've enjoyed this. Do let me know your thoughts down below, whether you're going to give this a go as well. I'll have all the materials listed for you and pop it into an ebook. So yeah, definitely see what you think of this challenge, and I hope your spoon turns out, well, as good as mine.